Welcome to Don't Cross the Streams, a talk about managing different types of work in SRE and operations-focused teams. Hi, my name is Eric Shamow. I'm the SRE manager for the Compute SRE team at Twitter. We manage the Mesos and Kubernetes clusters for a large portion of Twitter's workload. Prior to that, I was the reliability and platform manager at a company called Blue Owl, which was a small insurtech startup that was acquired by State Farm to kind of pilot their next-gen insurance product or cloud-native insurance product. Most of the things that I will be talking about in this discussion stem from my time at Blue Owl and prior. I do look forward to coming back at some point in time and talking about my experiences at Twitter. It's been interesting applying some of these concepts at scale. So what's the issue here? There's a famous book by Tom Limoncelli called Time Management for System Administrators. And I think it's kind of a recurring theme when I talk to SREs, when I talk to infrastructure folks, that it's very hard for us to manage all the different kind of requests that come in. The common theme that you hear from people is there's no time to do the work that needs to be done. Toil is building up. The amount of routine maintenance tasks are building up. There's no time to work on features. And all of this is really about there's no time to do all the things that we need to do. So how do we organize our time and still get done all the commitments that we make as at work? And in this talk, I'll be looking at this from both an individual and a personal perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about the different types of work. We will talk about what individuals' roles are with relation to that work on a team. And then we'll talk a little bit about coping strategies for how you and your teams can kind of work a little bit more efficiently to handle all the different kinds of incoming work. So whenever I'm in a situation, where I start a new job, and I immediately see that there are going to be lots of different types of work incoming. The thing that is useful to me is to immediately start putting that work into different types of buckets. And for the purposes of this discussion, we will separate work into 3 buckets. I think it is realistic to say that there are more than 3 buckets for the type of work that we get in SRE and infrastructure teams. But for the purposes of this conversation, this is simple enough. And within these buckets, let's say that work roughly breaks down into 3 categories. One is project and feature work. And this is the type of stuff that usually excites the business, right? It provides value. It's things that stakeholders have promised to other people in the business, moves the ball, keeps the business happy. And then at the same time as that, there's a certain amount of operational work to be done, keeping the lights on, service updates, security patches, regular automations of routine maintenance tasks. Oftentimes, if you have moved too fast in building your MVP features, this operational work is supporting or propping up the feature debt that you've built up in those features. And then there's a pile of other stuff, right? We've all got meetings and planning and ceremonies. I think we all know that part of this role is being more heavily involved in planning than traditional infrastructure folks, but that means you've got to spend the time in meetings. That means you've got to spend the time on white papers and design docs. Not to mention, you've got expense reports, you've got email, you've got people bringing you questions in Slack. All of this is legit. It's real time that you need to spend. It is part of your employment. It's not an extra that you do off hours, but we have to figure out how to account for it. So when I'm starting a new job, what I typically will do is set a target for how much time I want to spend in each of those buckets. And then I will execute according to that target and see how I did after the fact. So when I start a new job, I will typically say that I want a bucketing that looks something like this, right? In a mature organization, we would have very low toil, but the reality is probably 50% of the actual engineering work that I'm going to do is going to be operations work and toil, at least initially. And then 50% of the engineering work that I do is also going to be project work, ideally, right? So I'm spending half my time moving the ball forward, half the time doing maintenance, roughly, of my engineering time. And then the remaining 20% is left over for planning, email, Slack, all those other activities to support the engineering activities that I'm supposed to be engaged in. So let's flash forward 6 months and see how we did recording the data on that. And here's a little more what it really probably looks like, right? We have spent half of our absolute time, so more than 50% of our engineering time, working on operations and support tasks. Somehow we have spent 40% of our total time in meetings and email and Slack and responding to ad hoc requests. And then only 10% of my time is being spent on my project work. And I think all of us that have been responsible for infrastructure teams or SRE teams understand that this model is not sustainable. If you're not working on project work, the best you're going to do is tread water more likely your overall situation is going to start to regress because you are not investing the time in developing the solution and moving it forward. So it will start to bit rot. And what's more, those operational tasks don't really get you very much. They complete a thing, but they don't make the overall situation for everybody better. They just make a customer happy. And this is, maybe it's cheeky of me to quote myself in a talk, but the reality is in a battle between project work and operational work always seems to win. Let's talk a little bit about why that's the case. So first of all, I'll take it on an individual perspective, and then we can talk a little bit more about the overall organizational issues. As SREs, we like making people happy. Generally speaking, my experience of SREs is that we tend to enjoy enabling users. That's kind of core to the role of SRE. And sometimes working on some weird or infrastructure development bug doesn't really do that. We have hard integrations. Third-party APIs are down. It takes days to get a pull request merged. The cycle is very slow in infrastructure development, right? And helping a person gives you that dopamine hit. It gives you that instant gratification of having actually helped a person deliver a thing and achieve a goal. And so all of those things, I think, sometimes psychologically contribute to us focusing more on things that we can nail out quickly because we feel like we've done work versus things that might require a week's investment and then coming back to a stakeholder and saying, hey, we don't have the right access that we need to do this, or hey, I need more time. That's tough. And that leads into the last point here, which is that sometimes as engineers, we have poor boundaries. Because SREs like to please, sometimes that also means we can be easy to push around. Someone comes to us and says that something is really distressing or upsetting, and we want to help them and we want to fix their distress. But that results in us sometimes not honoring ourselves in terms of how we pick what to focus on. So how do we pick what to focus on? Not a huge fan of Dwight D. Eisenhower, but the Eisenhower Decision Matrix is a great rubric for thinking about what kind of work you want to do. And this matrix breaks work into two axes. It basically breaks work into urgent work and not urgent work. So it's on fire or it's not on fire. And important work, right? Things that actually improve my overall situation. And unimportant work, right? Which is work that really doesn't matter to do. And I think, and then it basically encourages you to pick which things you work on and which things you plan based on which quadrant and which combination of those factors you end up in. The reality is that, unfortunately, a huge amount of work that we do as SREs falls into the urgent but not important category. Somebody is upset about it right now, but there's no way to solve the problem right now because we're not getting ahead of our ongoing automation and ongoing maintenance issues. So because urgent tends to win with us, because things that are on fire tend to get attention, you as an engineer need to build a wall around your project time and protect it, because you are in fact helping the customers to take care of themselves. You know that if you get time to automate that self-service solution, they won't even have to come to you for the answer that they're looking for, and you wouldn't have to sit there and hand them this thing. And so in fact, it is more important to complete that automation than it perhaps is to handle their task right now. And in order to do that, you are going to need to build a wall around the time that you want to spend on those tasks. So we're going to talk about how we do that. Let's again take a step back and talk about what environment are you working now? Up until now, I've been talking about an individual SRE in a new role. But knowing that we're on a team, and that team has a lot of people on it, and all of the people on the team are facing the same sort of problems, let's zoom out for a second and talk about the environment in which we're working. Most of us are working in Scrum teams, right? Working in sprints, doing story breakdowns, pointing stories. Scrum makes some assumptions about the teams that work on these kind of projects. One is all of the team members have shared context, right? They're all working on the same goal. They're all helping each other achieve the same goal. Part of the assumption of Scrum is that the sprint is accepted by the team, right? The entire team has bought into the work and agreed that it is work that they want to do and can complete within this sprint. Also within Scrum, sprint scope is protected. If you are working on a Scrum project and somebody comes to you with an issue, that issue then goes to the product owner or the engineering manager for triage against the other issues in the sprint. It's not possible to just immediately start working on it. And what's more, if it's being done right, and I understand that many places it's not, the goal is sustainable velocity. The goal of Scrum is not to keep your resources utilized at 100%. The goal of Scrum is to make sure that everybody on the team is working together to make commitments that they can actually make week over week over week, so that engineering managers can predict what kind of velocity to expect and make predictions about what kind of features they're going to deliver. But I would posit that most of us in SRE teams and infrastructure teams aren't on teams. We're on groups. So what's the difference between a team and a group? Well, a group is a set of individuals. Maybe those individuals have a shared technical area or set of responsibilities or tasks. Those individuals are managed by the same person, and they work in the same department, and they may pair up individually, but they are not consistently working together on things. Again, they may partner, but the team as a whole is not focused. And what's more, utilization within a group is optimized for 100% utilization of each resource in the group. So in other words, we're not looking at what can the team produce as a sustainable velocity quarter over quarter, but is everybody on this team working and producing things 100% of the time? I would argue that most of us are in groups and not teams. And I think that makes it very difficult for us to achieve the kind of work that we talk about achieving in SRE. Doing sprints with a group of individuals like that will track the work, but it will not get you sustained velocity. It will not get you predictable velocity. It certainly won't increase your velocity. And it makes it difficult for you to be able to actually understand how you are balancing between that urgent and important work. So we've talked about different types of work. We've talked about different types of teams. Let's talk for a moment about some strategies for managing the work that comes in. So first, let's talk as an individual. And again, I understand this work is coming in from other people. And it's a little bit hard to talk about individual strategies when we're really placing the burden where it doesn't belong, right? The burden belongs with the organization and the sort of systemic underlying issues that cause SREs to be loaded up this way. So to be clear, I'm talking here about what you can do to react to the situation, but we will talk in a moment about what you can do together as a team and then what you can ask your management for in order to better support you. When I'm an individual and I'm put into an environment like this, one of the first things that I will do is split my days on the calendar. If I don't have the ability to rigorously split between project work and operations work, I will literally take time on my calendar and say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings, and Tuesday and Thursday afternoons are operations time, and vice versa for project time. I will block that time on my calendar. I will literally maintain separate queues for the 2 bits of work that I need to look into, and I will only look and work on issues in that one queue when I am in that time. One of the things that allows me to do is really actually measure and hold myself accountable to that time breakdown that I set for myself. I recognize that's not easy. I recognize there will be pressure to not do that. I recognize it may not work out, but it's certainly an easy way to, at the very least, measure whether or not I'm doing the right things at the right time and managing to keep myself honest to my commitments about what time I was going to spend on different things. If I can't have that work, or maybe in addition to having that work, one thing that really tends to work is put a big story in the sprint for operations. Okay, it's work the team is handling. Let's actually acknowledge that we're going to spend 10 points this sprint doing operational tasks, and let's track it in Jira. It doesn't change the tasks. It doesn't change the order that anything's being done about, but it will help your project management and your overall organization to start to be realistic about the work that you're doing. Because part of the problem that we get into is that work is off the books. A lot of times we're doing that work in DMs. We're doing that work on the side because we as SRE and infrastructure people feel an obligation to keep the systems up. And while that's great, and it's noble, and it comes from a long tradition for us, what it results in is that we are actually hiding the impact of what we do from the business. And oftentimes hiding the major proportion of what we do from the business because we think they won't understand. So tracking it in Jira is not a terrible first step to getting the business to be realistic about how much time you're spending on operations. And the third, and maybe the most difficult one, but the most important one, is commit to less. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's easy sitting in a meeting when a project manager or a stakeholder is really in pain and struggling to get you to deliver a thing that they need yesterday, and you're being honest about the fact that you can't deliver it. That's a hard boundary to hold. But we are not doing our customers any service by committing to things and not being able to do them. You know, I think a lot of times we're optimists, And we think if all things go well and I do my best and I manage to work all day and I manage to not go to that meeting on Thursday, I'll be able to do both of these things. But the reality is all work expands. All work manages to fall into rabbit holes or ends up delayed for some unknown reason. And part of our problem is we tend to commit to all this project work without thinking about the amount of operational work that's likely to come in. So if you know that you're doing effectively 5 points of operational work every sprint, put it in, and then commit to 5 points less of feature work. Yes, that's painful. Yes, that's difficult, but that sends the signal where it needs to go that this is the work that can honestly be done. So now let's talk about some ways to handle this as an organization. The easiest thing to do, and maybe the most safe thing to do, is to split the team. As an organization, you will do better isolating people dedicated to projects from ad hoc work. It's very hard for people to have multiple focuses. It's very hard for people to shift their mindset from one to the other. One way to solve this is to have a group of people working on your features. They can operate in a Scrum cadence, they can operate in sprints, they can make commitments that they are capable of keeping. And then have a second team of people operating maybe out of Kanban who are taking issues out of an issue tracker and working them in real time. You can rotate people between these teams. You don't have to have fixed membership. But what it allows you to do is focus. It allows you to focus a group of engineers on moving the ball forward. It also enables you to cap the team in terms of those percentages. So if you as a manager are wanting to say, I want 40% feature work, 40% operational work, right? Or 50-50 from an engineering perspective. If I take 50% of my team and put them in my Scrum team and 50% in the Kanban team, then I can at the very least ensure that the work is divided evenly between the resources that I have or the people that I have. And then I can start to understand how that's balancing out between the two teams and where I really need to hire or focus energy. The two teams that I suggest are splitting into platform and reliability. And the way that I've done this, and this is how we did it at Blue Owl, is platform is a separate team. In some organizations, this is just called SRE as well. They're just different types of SRE. I called it platform. It features on long-running project work, has a full product roadmap, ceremonies, we talk to stakeholders, quarterly feedback sessions, etc. That team has its own dedicated on-call. Then SREs are embedded with the individual engineering teams and build tooling to help those engineering teams use the platform that is being built by the platform team. Those SREs are fully embedded in their client teams. They participate in their team's on-call. So you can think of them as almost professional services engineers dispatched out to these engineering teams to help them get their work done on the platform that you are building separately and away from all that work. But you say, if you do that, there's still operational load. You still got to operate the platform. You've still got to upgrade Kubernetes, right? You've still got to do security patches. So when handling that operational load, here are some hints for what you can do as a team. One is make a designated triage or escalation point, right? Pick a person on the team weekly, nominate that person to be the one point of contact for triage, right? Instruct them that their job is not to solve the user tickets, but simply to triage them and place them in the appropriate queue for work. Then you monitor the load on that escalation point and set a cap for it and have rules for what happens when you hit the cap. Because what's going to happen is that person's going to filter all the work. And of course, they are going to be overwhelmed, right? And so we need to prioritize our platform work and our feature work about what self-service we're providing, what automations and primitives we're providing to end users to enable them to do their own work, what documentation we're providing. All of that needs to be based on how much toil is being incurred by your operational team. The thing to understand about all of this is that operations are a signal. It's data. It's good data about the operability of your system, about the automation of your system, and about the ability of your engineers to actually continue to work on and make commitments around that system. And by having your engineers do that work and stuff it in their pocket and do it off book, you're throwing that data away. You are losing valuable operational data that you could use to justify additional hires, more time, laxer deadlines with the organization as a whole. So my closing plea to you is whatever you do and however you cope with this, do not throw the data away. Record the data. Record the signals that you're getting about how operable your software is, and then use that data to help your organization make more informed and better decisions about what kind of work to take on in the future. Thank you.